Well, it looks like All Might didn't exactly make the best decision when he was choosing his successor, now did he? Yup, we're back with part 3, and this is most likely going to be the finale depending on how I decide to take this story. What I have in mind now is currently going to most likely lead this to be the final part, but trust me guys, it's about to be a banger, so strap in, get your popcorn, and enjoy the what if.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Pick off our story with Izuku meeting All for One, and it's during this meeting that All for One would finally tell Izuku that it seems that his allegiance to the League of Villains is one that is true. He would look at Izuku and go on to tell him how proud he has made him of the choice that he's made, and Izuku would go on to say that he's glad he could make somebody proud, although he's not sure how he feels about the fact that he's helping his father's own worst enemy out. Izuku doesn't really care so long as he gets the quirk of One for All, and All for One pretty much ends up telling him that if they defeat All Might and kill him, he is more than just promised that quirk, that he will be his own successor and inherit his own quirk of All for One. Shigaraki would be right there in the room, and from here he would say, "What? You're gonna give it to that brat? No way, I've been here longer. I'll kill him if you do." And from here, All for One looks to the direction of Shigaraki as he simply says, "Quiet, Tomura." He proceeds to walk towards him as Shigaraki's like, "What are you doing, master?" But it's at this point that All for One would put his hand straight over the face of Shigaraki, and he would proceed to essentially begin to drain out the quirk of decay straight out of him. This would lead Izuku to then be looked at by All for One as he would say, "Lower your head." And from here, All for One proceeds to give the quirk of decay straight to Izuku, as Izuku can feel the power coursing through him, and now finally knowing what it's like to have a quirk would be impressed nonetheless. Like, he would feel like a completely different person. Izuku feels like he was just reinvigorated with power, with strength, with just resilience, everything. It feels incredible. Izuku would wonder, is this really what I've been missing my entire life? Guess I would have known what this was like if my father would have given me my quirk, but instead he chose that other kid. I'll never forgive you for that, Dad. From here, he would go on to essentially look to All for One and tell him that the plan will go down like this. If he knows his father, and he does, his father will most likely end up arriving there with everybody else. And the best course of action would be for Kurogiri to essentially arrive at the USJ and to kind of like scope out the area, I guess you could say. Like, it would be very smart if I'm having a little bit of trouble explaining this, but pretty much he's trying to say that it would be extremely smart for Kurogiri to scope the area out and to find the best locations to teleport most of the students in, saying that this time they're not going to be doing things sloppily and that they're not going to be taking many men. They just need a handful of well-selected ones that are very competent and are capable of doing what they need. So the army that they bring to the USJ event is actually going to be halved, and there's only going to be half as many soldiers in the areas that would benefit them, like the water people and the water people, the people who have like earth powers and the mountain ranges and stuff like that. And not to mention, All for One would end up handing a couple of them, the strongest ones of each section, an enhancement quirk amplification drug, just in case anything were to go wrong. Izuku would even suggest maybe taking 2 Nomus just in case. One of the Nomus that is there at the USJ, and a couple, like 2 more like weaker Nomus just in case. Like, this is not something that they'll most likely need, but it's better to be safe than sorry. And so All for One would decide that this is actually way better of a plan than what Shigaraki had thought of. Izuku says that he will most likely start everything, and that they should start the entire operation off with a kind of jamming system so that they can't contact the main heroes at the area, right? And so from here, the plan would pretty much just begin to be made by Zuko and All For One. And the very next day, what would end up happening is Izuku would go to school just like normal. Izuku's not acting out of the ordinary whatsoever. However, after school, he does end up making his way towards the USJ to scope the area out with Kurogiri. And once there, they end up finding out the best course of action for everything, making the plan up as they go. And the next 2 days would just be the most impatient days of his life. Izuku would literally not dare look at his father in the eyes, not once. And All Might would have tried during that time to pretty much like say sorry for not choosing him for the quirk, but he can't take it back now. That would be completely unfair to him. But Izuku does finally talk back to him. Before entering his room, he says, "Unfair? You want to talk about unfair? Unfair is filling your child's head up with dreams of inheriting your quirk, and then the day that it finally should come, the day that he's finally ready to, after all the years of training, to just rip it away from him and give it to somebody else, then to go over and treat him better than you ever treated your son. You care about that successor of yours more than you care about your own son. But don't worry, you'll get what's coming to you soon." He slams a door on All Might's face, and All Might tries to budge in, right? But when All Might ends up coming into the door, Izuku just looks at him and says, "Dad, I swear to God, if you take one step in my room, this is not going to be fun for you." And All Might would proceed to essentially, like, he doesn't even want to fight his son. Like he's like, whatever. Like he literally is just like, I don't know what to do. Like, this kid, like, he's changed so much ever since he didn't get the quirk. And it's like, bro, that quirk literally should have been your son's. Like, you can't blame him. But regardless though, Izuku in his rage would continue with this type of attitude for the following couple of days. And Izuku would decide that there will be 3 casualties the day of the the USJ. Number 1 will be Katsuki Bakugo. Number 2 will be the successor of One for All. And number 3 will be All Might himself. Those are the 3 people that Izuku wants to kill most of all. The rest of them can live if they really want, but if anybody gets hurt, they get hurt, I guess. From here, what would end up happening is essentially the day would finally arrive and Ida would have already been picked as class president. Izuku this time wouldn't have actually been picked, and we don't even get the scene where Ida pretty much leads everybody out of the conflict. That is the conflict with the news reporters. But regardless, we do end up getting this really cool scene where everybody's on the bus and Izuku kind of is like inner monologuing, right? If you guys have even seen Death Note, it's something similar to that, where Izuku just has a smile on his face, and because of the fact that All Might is actually his dad, he would know to essentially make it so that All Might will most likely make his way there, right? Basically, he would proceed to have it so that somebody like Izuku, now that he knows that All Might won't be there because he ended up using his quirk all day, and like he realizes that All Might isn't joining them, Izuku would pretty much end up knowing that his phone needs to be the one to send the signal to his father All Might, or to just kind of get the message across to his father some way or another, right? And so what would he do? He would essentially end up telling Kurogiri to make it seem as if one of the students escaped, and preferably that student should be Ida. Tenya Ida, the blue-haired boy with the strange white armor. And so he would go off in search of All Might, and while that's happening, all of the other students at this current moment would pretty much be getting picked off one by one. Tsuyu and Mineta, as well as Izuku, would end up making their way towards the boat portion, and they would all be defeated. And Izuku would be defeated with kind of a little bit of a wink, as he gets punched in the face by one of the villains and gets completely knocked out, right? Tsuyu and Mineta, following this, were completely unable to defend themselves, and they would all get tied up, with Izuku being loosely tied up so he can finally make his reveal once his father arrives. Izuku would be tied up in front of the man himself, All For One. And, right now, as of this current moment, I'm going to be saying that he's using this strange shape-shifting quirk, right? Where he has the body of what's it called? No, I'm not going to say he's using a shape-shifting quirk itself. I'm just going to be saying that he whatever. Let's give him the shape-shifting quirk, seeing as Toga and Dabi and all of them still haven't become yet members of the League of Villains. So what ends up happening here is All For One is the one who is currently present there in the middle of it all, with a shape-shifting quirk transformed into Toya. No, not Toya, but what's it called? Shigaraki, right? Now, because he's transformed into Shigaraki, he would try to mimic all of his attributes in the way that he acts and just kind of gives off this man-child persona. But it isn't until All Might arrives that everything would finally start changing. Once the villains see All Might scowl and All Might notices that all of the kids have pretty much been but defeated, even his own son, he would begin being like, oh, what do I do? Like, how do I help? Not only that, but his own successor as of this current moment is currently having to face off against one low-end Nomu, right? Now, obviously, he would be doing fairly well when it comes to facing off against this Nomu, because the successor actually has a great access to already a solid 35% of full cowling, something that Izuku would not have been able to get to until like about season 5 or 6. Like, that's insane. So his successor is already displaying insane levels of strength and would easily be able to take care of the low-end Nomus. This would lead to the high-end Nomu eventually coming in, and not the high-end one, but you know, the one that we see in the USJ, right? And once he has to fight that one, that's where the battle would kind of begin to shift gears. As of that moment, it would change, and we would pretty much end up getting a scene where All Might ends up busting in and pretty much saving his successor, noticing that Izuku is tied up by ropes and being held right by All For One. And, you know, he would end up having to face off against the Nomu, right? Now, All Might, I do genuinely believe, would be able to defeat the Nomu. And so we are going to be giving him that, seeing as the successor is actually there to help him out and back him up. He would not lose as much stamina or steam as he would in the original. But regardless, his, stamina is already running low. So it would be very hard for All Might to keep up whatsoever. And so we end up kind of getting this moment where once All For One notices that All Might wins, he would clap and say, "All Might, it's been quite a while since I've seen you." And from here, you know, All Might is like, "All For One?" You know, he's shocked because he's like, "I thought you dead, huh? You thought I died. Well, you can't get rid of me that easily, Toshinori. This is your successor, huh? I kind of figured that you would choose your son someday, not him. And I'm pretty sure that's what your own son would have thought." From here, Izuku would proceed to get up and unravel everything as he stands right next to All For One, and he proceeds to say, "Hey, father, been a while, huh?" And from here, you know, All Might is like, "No, you didn't. I knew you were mad, but to go to this length just to spite me. Izuku, please tell me you're lying. Please tell me that this is some sort of shape-shifting quirk or something. Please, don't join him. You don't know what this man can do. You don't know what this man has done to our family. You don't know what he's done to me, what he's gonna do to the world. You have to trust me on this one, Izuku. Please, just trust me this one time. Just once in your life, listen to me." And from here, Izuku goes on to say, "Once in my life? How about once in your life you take the moment to notice me? This is the first time in 15 years that you noticed me. The only time that you actually took the time out of your day in the past 4 years to actually give a damn about your own son. Ever since that day you got injured, you've been different. You've been acting strange. You don't pay attention to Mother or I. You don't come home as much. You're always busy with your doctor appointments, with fighting crime, staying in other places, and not even giving a damn about your family. You're never there for us. And even when I thought that everything would be fine because someday at the very minimum I'd get to inherit your quirk, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do, Dad? Tell me, huh? You give it to somebody else, and not me. I deserved it. I needed that quirk, and now I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna kill your successor right in front of you." As from here, All For One laughs and says, "And you think that's it, All Might? Not only did I turn your son on my side, but I also turned Nana Shimura's grandson to mine as well. Shigaraki, he is Nana Shimura's grandson, so his name is Shigaraki Tomura, right?" And from here, All Might just kind of has like that mental breakdown scene that we would get in the Camino Ward incident, where he pretty much freaks out and like he loses his cool for a second. And with this happening, a successor right beside him watching his hero have this crazy reaction would not know what to do. But he does know one thing. He needs to bring his son back and at the very least do something good. So what does he do? He says, I can't listen to this anymore. All Might, snap out of it. You need to get your head in the game. There's villains in front of us, and whether you want to accept it or not, your own son is now one of them. So are you going to help me take them down, or are we going to let everybody here at the USJ die? From here, All Might snaps back into reason, and they would both lunge at each other, with Izuku rushing at the new successor of One for All, and All for One and All Might clashing fists. The battle would be explosive, and Izuku would land blow after blow on the successor of One for All. Izuku would end up actually landing a couple of attacks that wouldn't actually be able to decay everything, but slowly during the battle, Izuku would begin to get more and more access to the abilities of decay, and so would be able to actually put up a huge amount of a fight, and would even be able to begin decaying the surrounding area, leading the successor to eventually have to fight so hard that he ends up having to unlock float in a last second effort to try to stay off of the ground and not decay himself. The decaying process wouldn't spread too far, considering Izuku is the one who's in control of it and would only want to kill him, not everybody else. But it's at this moment that another individual would come flying in, this being Bakugo, and he would come in and say, "The son of All Might's a villain, huh? I guess now I really get the chance to finish this." He comes blasting in with an explosion and tries to shoot Izuku with the howitzer impact, but Izuku blitzes at him and proceeds to grab Bakugo straight by the face. From here, Bakugo would let out a gut-wrenching scream as his entire face would begin to decay, and it would be gruesome to watch. It's almost like the disappearances of Infinity War, as after Thanos snapped, and Bakugo's body just begins to decay in front of everybody, with Izuku saying, "Don't you dare call me weak again. If I'm so weak, how come you're dead?" But the successor of All Might would immediately get angry at that, rush in and unlock more and more of his potential slowly as the battle would rage on. It would be as if he would be shattering his limits slowly, and as this is all happening, All for One and All Might would be going out in an all-out battle, a brawl of titans, where each of them is not giving the other a single step forward, and they're going completely out for blood. Eventually, though, both of them would end up finally getting into their last clash, with each of them yelling each other's respective name. All Might screaming, "All for One!" and All for One screaming, "All Might, you die now!" As, they're charging up their massive attacks and they clash, and, it would be United States of Smash Brawl versus the gigantic fist that All for One is able to create. And they're both just going at it, titans are clashing, and eventually the wind pressure would be blowing into the battle between Izuku and the successor of All Might, who, I know it's kind of late, but we might as well give a name. The successor I'm going to be saying is just going to be named Toya. Why not? Like, it's not Dabi, but let's just give him the name Toya because it's easy to remember, right? Now, Izuku and Toya would be going at it, right? And, they're both, throwing hands. And at this moment, Toya is pretty much overwhelming Izuku. But as this is all happening and Izuku is watching, his mentor, who, his evil mentor, go at it with his father, he would kind of break through his limits because he doesn't want to see his father win. He knows what will happen. If his father wasn't willing to give him the quirk of All for One, then he'll definitely be willing to throw his own son into the jail. So Izuku doesn't want to go there, and so one thing would kind of like snap inside of Izuku's head, and he would be able to activate and go further beyond the abilities that he already has. However, this would be after All Might defeats All for One, and in the final clash, he would switch the power from one arm to another and just bam, straight at All for One's face, completely taking him out of the battle, as Izuku would land back on the floor, right? And at this moment, he proceeds to essentially just kind of completely just step on the ground, right? And the decay ability would lunge at the direction of All Might, and All Might would quickly be able to dodge out of the way using the last remnants of One for All that he has left, as Izuku would blitz in, and the successor Toya would try to stop him, but it would be far too late. Izuku blitzes in and grabs at the face of All Might and would proceed to essentially decay him instantly. All Might, after having felt this, would fall to the ground and not be able to even utter sorry or like finish him off for me or you're next, nothing. He would just die immediately, and All for One would watch this thing as he's still semi-conscious and would laugh. as it's at this moment that rage would overfill Toya and he would be able to lunge at Izuku, slamming him up into the air and going into 50% of full cowling access, just completely berating Izuku and absolutely slamming him straight into the ground. There was absolutely nothing that Izuku was able to do, and he was just completely getting overwhelmed by all the attacks that were getting landed on him. Eventually, Toya would finish his onslaught on Izuku, and Izuku would just be on the ground, just completely unconscious, finding himself inside of a Tartarus holding cell the very next day. And Izuku would be screaming, "Let me out! Let me out!" Right? Like just trying to break free. But, you know, Toya would be watching to him, talking to him behind a glass screen as he asks him what led him to do this. Izuku doesn't answer him and says, "I hate you. I hate you with every fiber of my being. If it wasn't for you, I would have got the quirk. I would have became the #1. This never would have happened if you weren't born. And trust me, someday I'll get out of here. Someday I'll find everything you love and take it from you as well. And then we'll see how you like it when you're the one who's stuck inside of an infinite prison cell." From here, Toya says that's never going to happen, and Aizawa would be watching Izuku through the glass as well, using his erasure quirk, trying to kind of send a message of "you'll never escape," as Izuku would simply not say a word, and for the next couple of years would be detained inside of Tartarus, with the new successor of One for All being the one who reigns supreme, and people finding out about the altercation between All Might, his death, and even Bakugo Katsuki's death. They would hold a massive funeral, and from this would come everybody completely just berating Izuku, saying that they all knew that he was a failure from the start, and All Might should have taken notes and gotten rid of him when he had the chance, saying that it was all his son's fault that All Might died. His own son took their hero away from them. And everybody kind of hates Izuku, but all for One is still in Tartarus, mind you, and he still does live. So that does give us the option of potentially seeing Izuku come back once more. Villain Deku would maybe have a chance to come back, maybe even stronger than before. But that's for another day if you guys want that. If you guys truly want another bonus part and you guys want me to do something like that, then you guys are actually going to be having to smash a grand total of 1,000 likes on this video if you guys want me to even consider doing it. If you guys like really want it, then smash 1,000 likes in the first 24 hours and I'll end up dropping it. But I highly doubt that. So, you know, if you guys hit that like goal, then I know you guys really want it. But if you guys don't, then that's just the end of What If Deku Was Allmights Son, and we're going to move on to bigger and better things. That said, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Xehther, and I am out. Peace.